Katherine Gibson for Insight. To discuss the details of Iran's nuclear program, I'm joined by Blaise Misztal, Associate Director of Foreign Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Blaise, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Can you get into some of the main concerns about Iran's nuclear program?
Well, ultimately, the concern is Iran's ability to produce a nuclear weapon, and whether they're using their nuclear program purely for peaceful purposes, which is to produce electricity to power their country, or whether it does actually have a military dimension and they are aspiring to build a weapon.
Iran claims that its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes. Can you take us through the different levels of enrichment and what that might tell us about Iran's intentions?
Sure. So the most common level of enrichment used at civilian nuclear power plants is enriching to about between 3 and 5%. That's the level of enrichment of uranium that's used to produce fuel rods that go into the reactors to produce power. You can also use fuel that's been enriched up to about levels of 20%, which might have limited uses for medical purposes. Iran has a test reactor, a research reactor that they use, which they use to produce medical isotopes, which uses uranium enriched to 20%. Levels above that have really no peaceful purposes.
I've spoken with another expert in nuclear technology who estimated that it would take Iran around 6 months to stockpile enough uranium to get up to weapons grade. Do you agree with that assessment?
It's difficult to know because there are so many factors that go into making that calculation. We've done a range of calculations that sort of on the high end agree with that, which we think 6 months is a possible but very conservative estimate. We think that on the lower end it could be as little as 42 days if a lot of sort of much more progressive, I guess, assumptions hold true, which is it's difficult to know because we don't have access to a lot of Iran's nuclear facilities.
So how exactly do you calculate those timelines?
So largely on the basis of data provided by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which goes in and inspects a limited number of facilities. And they give us data about how much uranium Iran has enriched, but also how much it's enriching sort of on a day-to-day basis. So based on that, we can sort of estimate their general enrichment rate and how long it would take them to enrich to given levels.
So if it were to be at the low end of the estimate, would that give the international community enough time to react?
Just barely. So right now, inspections average about every 6 weeks or so. So really, we're right on at 42 days. We're right on the cusp of that. If that timeline falls any shorter, then Iran could possibly enrich to weapons grade levels in between inspections and remove that uranium before inspectors get there and find out what's happened.
And is there a risk that civilian nuclear technology or uranium enriched for peaceful purposes can be easily converted into uranium for nuclear weapons?
There is. I mean, it could happen one of two ways. One is if it's actually put into fuel rods and inserted into a nuclear reactor. Spent fuel contains plutonium, which can be reprocessed and used for a nuclear weapon. Iran is fairly far away from being able to do that. They haven't actually created any fuel rods or started or inserted them into the reactor at Bushehr yet. So we're a good ways away from that. However, they are stockpiling large amounts of low-enriched uranium that they're not turning into fuel rods. And there is a question of what they're planning to do with it. And as we said earlier, they could turn that into enough material for a nuclear weapon in anywhere between, on the low end, maybe 6 weeks to 6 months.
Does Iran possess all of the material that they need to produce a nuclear weapon?
Material, yes. Technology, it's not entirely clear. So there's really three elements to a nuclear weapon. There's obviously the fissile material, so the highly enriched uranium or the plutonium. And there's the actual weapon itself, so the device that makes the fissile material reach supercritical mass, start a nuclear chain reaction, and causes the nuclear explosion. And then there's the delivery mechanism, so putting it on a bomb or mounting it on a missile or rocket. We know that Iran has missiles that can reach into Europe that are capable of carrying nuclear payloads. There is evidence that they've tried to build or experimenting with building intercontinental ballistic missiles, which could deliver nuclear payloads even further. And we know that they have the means and the materials to create fissile material. So the real question is, do they have the technology to actually build a nuclear weapon, the actual device itself? There's a lot of controversy about that. The United States and its national intelligence estimates says that Iran has stopped working on that aspect of its nuclear program. The International Atomic Energy Agency, in a report that it released in November of last year, gave very detailed evidence suggesting that there's at least bits and pieces of that research going on to this day in Iran.
And how is that evidence obtained?
It's obtained through intelligence either gathered directly by the IAEA, so documents that they've received, or from intelligence gathered by other nation states that's then shared with the IAEA.
What would military strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities accomplish?
They would not definitively stop Iran from ever having a nuclear weapon, in so much as sort of that possibility or the potential for a nuclear weapon is contained in the know-how and the knowledge of its scientists and its technicians, which is something we can eliminate. What we can do is delay their program by either destroying the centrifuges they've already built, by destroying the stockpiles of low-enriched uranium that they have, by denying them access to the facilities that they have. We can sort of either slow down or bring to a halt for the time being their nuclear program.
Very good. It was very good to be able to speak with you today. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.